Now, this is the point where I expected and hoped that I would be introducing a speaker to speak about the U-boat and Glandor. Unfortunately, he is not well. Then I hoped and expected that the substitute that we asked would be here for me to introduce. And he discovered that he had double booked his diary. And then I hoped and expected that the third person we approached might be available, and so I could introduce him. And that didn't work either. So then at our meeting on Tuesday, we scratched our heads, and somehow I got landed in talking to you tonight. So I'm sorry if you are very disappointed that you're not going to hear about the U-boat. We will try and put that on another occasion. But you'll see from the screen there that the subject that I want to talk about is St Faughnan's College. Now, before April 1921, this is the view that would have greeted you as you approached the town from the Chapel Lane. St Faughnan's College, situated in what was known as the Cathedral Precincts, and which is now occupied by the White House. Now, obviously that building has been erased from the townscape, and I think very possibly it's been erased from the community's memory, and that very possibly people's knowledge, even of its existence, might be fairly sketchy. So what I want to do in this talk is to give you some historical background to the college, and also why it is no longer there, and to give some insights into what life at the college was like. I first wrote an article about this for one of our early journals, and then I revised this as I got a bit more information when we wrote our history of St Faughnan's Cathedral. And subsequent to that, I have received more information and so thanks to, in a large part, to others who have provided me with this further information. That should change. Did you press press start? Why does it start?
Me too.
You have to press start.
Oh,
there you go. There we go. There we go.
if you keep the cursor on the
Right, okay. Yeah. So that is the building, which, as you see, is quite a substantial building. A useful source of information on the college is the Cathedral Chapter Minute Book, which records the proceedings of the Cathedral Chapter, that's the Dean and the Canons. And in 1725, there is an entry to the effect that, quote, the wall of the churchyard next to the Brigadier's garden to be the first work gone about. So it refers to the Brigadier's house, which lies north of the cathedral. And the brigadier referred to was Brigadier Freak. And so I take that to be the site of the school. Now let's see if we can get this to work. Yeah, this is the map from the Freak estate maps. And you see a building there, there's the cathedral just north of it. So that was the site that was referred to in that bit I just quoted about Brigadier Freak. Now, at that stage, it was leased by Matthew O'Mahony. Now, what point it became part of the cathedral precincts is unclear. And I cannot establish whether school existed before this site or the dates at which the college itself was built. Those are some of the issues that I am unable to, have been unable to ascertain. But a later one of the first ordnance survey maps clearly shows there St Faughnan's College and the cathedral, and a bigger building than was in the previous map. So what was the origin of this school? Diocesan schools were established under English Tudor legislation to provide grammar schools in every diocese. So Bandon Grammar is an example which served the Diocese of Cork. And Middleton College was the equivalent in the Diocese of Cloyne. And the Endowed Schools of Ireland Commission in 1856 fills in some details. It states that its foundation was by statute in the reign of Queen Elizabeth I in 1570. So the school college was founded, that's the date of its founding, 1570. As I say, no record of where exactly it was at that stage. And the object of the school is stated in a report of 1831 as being, quote, for a free school in which children of residents in the diocese of whatever religious persuasion are entitled to a classical education as day scholars free of expense, the master being at liberty to receive voluntary remuneration. So in 1867, there were 27 pupils. And of those 27 pupils, 18 were adherents to what was called the established church, i.e. the Anglican Church, and the other 9 were Roman Catholics. So it was established to provide free, education for all. And the Lord Lieutenant of Cork appointed the schoolmasters. Now in the cathedral narthex, there is a board listing the principals of the school, and the first named is that of Thomas Goodwin in 1695. And after Goodman, there is a gap until 1825 when George Armstrong is listed. In 1826, a report of the Commissioners of Irish Education mentioned that a Reverend James White is listed as principal. At that stage, it was still very small. There were 18 Protestants and 2 Roman Catholic scholars. One source of information about the school at the time comes in the Cork Constitution newspaper, in which it was the custom to advertise the school and report on success in examinations. For instance, in 1829, the school was now under a Reverend Joshua Wood, and it states the curriculum of subjects available. The course of education comprises of Latin, Greek, French, Italian, and English languages, geography, astronomy, history, writing, arithmetic, and mathematics. And then dancing and fencing, when required, are the only extra charge. Then in 1832, again in the Cork Constitution, the school advertises itself like this. This is in 1832. The situation of the house is particularly healthful. There is a good playground attached, and the children have the advantage of sea bathing. The inculcation of moral and religious principles forms a prime feature, as Mr. Wood considers education not even begun, while the youthful mind is allowed to remain in ignorance of that divine truth, which must be the firmest foundation of character, even in this life. But such good things, however, came at a price. Terms for boarders are listed as 40 guineas per annum, with 2 guineas per annum for washing. Each young gentleman was to come provided with 2 pairs of sheets and a silver tablespoon. Central objects for education. The college is mentioned in some letters of 1840 from Mr. Daly of Bantry, who was a ship owner and timber merchant. And in it, he said that trade is bad, and only for a loan from friends could he afford to send his boys to the college. So it was attracting people from further afield than Rosscarbery. But although it was set up, as I read earlier, as being for free education, obviously boarders were being charged, and poor Mr. Daly had come upon hard times and couldn't afford to send his sons there, well, only through help. Examination results were often reported, and in 1838, when the Reverend George Beamish was principal, such familiar names appear as Donovan, Wolfe, and Jennings, names that we're familiar with. Now, 1869 was a year of great significance and upheaval for the Church in Ireland, with the passage through the Westminster Parliament of the Irish Church Act. This disestablished the Church so that it was no longer the United Church of England and Ireland, but now the Church in Ireland had to stand on its own as the Church of Ireland. At that stage, the school changed its name to St Faughnan, spelt Faughnan, as opposed to our familiar spelling of Faulkner. And along with similar schools became known as endowed schools, dependent on financial support from educational societies. The role of educational societies in Ireland is actually very significant in terms, for instance, of schools that were set up in places like Ventry and elsewhere by the Church of Ireland. Steering the college through this time of change with the disestablishment of the church was the Reverend James Wynne O'Callaghan, who was the master. O'Callaghan was in charge from 1854 to 1876. There is a delightful monument to him in the Cathedral Narthex, which reads thus: "He was peculiarly qualified to be an instructor of youth, as well from his rare classical and educational attainments as from a natural kindness of heart, which endeared him to his numerous pupils. In all his dealings, he was greatly respected as a man of the utmost probity, a true Christian pastor, and a trustworthy friend." His successor, John Berry, was only in charge a little more than a year, but long enough, however, for him to place a very fulsome advert in the Cork Constitution in July 1879, which was there to encourage parents, obviously, to send their children. He writes, "This is strictly a private school conducted on English school principles, pupils prepared for the universities, the learned professions, and commercial pursuits, special pains taken with junior boys. Particular care devoted to the health and social comforts of the boys, who are all treated as parlor boarders, school apartments, lofty and well ventilated, consisting of a large schoolroom, spacious dormitories, dining room, and study, situated in a healthful and picturesque neighborhood, sea bathing with necessary precautions, extensive recreation grounds, 4 resident masters who have gained experience in high-class schools in England." I get the impression that the kind of people who were attracted to this school were a kind of band of people less than the kind of Anglo-Irish gentry that we think of, who tended to send their youngsters to England to school, but it possibly appealed to those who had social aspirations, and that it offered something, that an education that they hoped would lead to something more for their sons than they possibly experienced themselves. When Berry left the college, it was closed for a period to reopen in 1880, in which year the Reverend George Burton was appointed. He stayed until 1892, when he was appointed rector of Rosscarbery and Ardfield. He has left us a photographic record of the college and area, and I have a digital copy which a descendant gave me, and it helps to build up a picture of what the college was like. A room in the college there, to teachers relaxing with their pipes. You see the boys in uniform there. A picnic, I think, on the Warren. There's another picture which gives the impression of the extent of the building. And then the healthy swimming that they talked about. In 1881, the staff were joined from England by a 19-year-old called Charles Wilkins Thomas. He was an artist, but like so many, he struggled to make a living. He saw an advert for a teacher at St Faughnan's College for, quote, someone to teach mathematics, some French, to play the organ in chapel, should also be good at games. Well, he admitted that he hated games and professed to be weak in the subjects he was expected to teach. He could, however, play the organ and became the cathedral organist. During his stay in Ross, he painted a number of pictures which have been donated to the cathedral. That's a drawing he made here. Here is the college. I think he's got his perspective slightly wrong, but you get the general idea. And then the next one you will recognize as Rowry Bridge, which is quite a nice one. From 1892 to 1902, William Warnock Smith was master, and in 1902 we come to the final headmaster, the Reverend Alan Edward Penrose French. And the residence of the principal at the time was the present deanery. The dean at that time was Dean Isaac Reeves, and he lived in that rather grand building in Glandore, which was the convent. That was the home of the Reeves. In 1903, in Cole's Church and Parish Records, the college is described as, quote, a flourishing school. And that is certainly the impression gained from a school prospectus that is in the in the deanery. And once again, what is being emphasized is the healthy and pleasant situation of the college, combining country and seaside, which was deemed to be specially suitable for boys, morally, physically, and mentally. The school boasted both tennis and racquet courts. The racquet courts is that building you see at the end. I think I've got another picture of it. Racquet courts and cricket and football were played in their seasons. The college boasted the most modern sanitary arrangements, which it states were installed at much cost. And then continuing from the prospectus, the system of work adopted in the college is specially designed for such as require, 1, a sound preparatory education, more especially for English schools, 2, a really practical commercial education, 3, a high-class classical, mathematical, or scientific education. Pupils preparing for the university's professions, civil service, and other examinations will be worked specially for such. In other words, again, I think it was offering people a leg up, and that was how I think they saw themselves. And then Mr. French may, under certain circumstances and at special terms, take a few private pupils to read for Sandhurst and for militia preliminary exams. So Sandhurst, the army, British Army training place. Old boys mentioned as providing a reference for the school include various clergy, including the Reverend McConnell of Lepp, also Mr. B.R. Purden of Shepperton Park, Lepp, W.F. Anderson, agent for the Bank of Ireland in Clonakilty, and interestingly, Mr. J. Roy, Esquire, Georgetown, Demerara, British Guiana. So he was a former pupil. Another former pupil was William Wood Wolfe, 1871 to 1960, a large farmer and shopkeeper described in the 1911 census as Methodist brackets agnostic, who became a Catholic on marriage. He became chairman of Skibbereen Urban District Council and was, of course, a brother to Jasper Wolfe. Dr. Dan Donovan, the famous famine doctor and native of Rosscarbery, is reputed to have been educated here as well. At the beginning of the 20th century, the college was therefore very clearly positioned within a British loyalist ethos, albeit, as I say, still being open to a certain number of Catholic pupils. How it was viewed by the rest of the community, we can only speculate when they saw these boys going around in their nice uniforms. But what was described in 1903 as a flourishing school did not last much longer. In 1905, French was appointed as rector of the parish of Ross, and there is no record of any further appointments for the college. Three further pieces of evidence suggest that this was the date of its closure. Number one, an advert in the Skibbereen Eagle of the 23rd of December 1905, giving notice of an extensive auction of furniture, etc., from the college. Secondly, in what is called in the Church of Ireland, the Preacher's Book, in which every service is recorded along with attendance and so on. And it, at the ending and the beginning of each term, was also noted either college returns or college vacation. The final entry is on August the 6th, 1905, vacation at college. And there's no further mention of the college in the Preacher's Book after that. And then thirdly, I could find no reference to occupants of the college in the 1911 census. So it's almost as though it's disappeared. And what is interesting is that Dean Charles Webster, writing a guide, was short history or a guide to the cathedral in 1927, makes no reference to the college at all. So it seems to have disappeared. So what happened to the building after 1905 is hard to know until we come to its part in the events of early 1921, with the burning of a number of houses by the IRA. For instance, Bogatia, the home of Lord Tom Kingston. The end of March, there was the famous assault on the barracks in Rosscarbery. Bombs and fire destroyed the ground floor rooms before the RIC men surrendered with heavy casualties. In the following days, it was rumoured that the Crown forces were about to occupy the college. And so the IRA put a stop to that possibility by burning it down. About a week later, the volunteers pressed their advantage, returned to Rosscarbery, and torched Derry House, which had been recently acquired by the well-known loyalist barrister Alexander Sullivan, who incidentally had been the only barrister to be found to defend Sir Roger Casement in 1916. Two other houses were burned in the following months: Carmore, the home of the Hungerfords, and Merton House, opposite the barracks where the daughters of Canon John Whitley resided. What then? Well, it appears that Mrs. Zoe Beecher, who was the wife of Dean Beecher, bought the college the previous year to its destruction, with the aim of converting it into a residence. And in 1921, after it had been burnt down, she took a claim to the Irish Compensation Commission for £6,000 to build a new house on the site. And the following was reported in the Southern Star, June the 25th, 1921. Mrs. Beecher Rosscarbery claimed £6,000 for the destruction of a dwelling house known as the College Rosscarbery. Mr. Hungerford, B.L., instructed by Mr. Winder, appeared for the applicant. The applicant gave evidence of the destruction of the college. Sergeant Milan swore the college was burned by armed civilians. Mr. Hill, quantity surveyor, estimated that the cost of building a residence there would be £5,400. His Honour reserved judgment. In 1923, Mrs. Beecher was awarded £3,030, with every penny to be spent on rebuilding. And that house is the White House, which the Beechers built for their retirement. And there is an early photo of the house. An interesting event during Dean Beecher's time as Dean was recorded in the Southern Star of October the 10th, 1925, presumably during the building of the White House on the site of the college. And this is the report. Our Clonakilty correspondent, having visited Rosscarbery, where the 5th-century-old British coins were found by workmen employed for the Dean of Ross, supplies further particulars. The coins, about 20 in number, were found embedded in yellow clay under the foundations of the wall enclosing the old Rosscarbery College grounds. The coins are all practically the same size, and most bear the clear impression of the profiles of Henry VII and Henry VIII. So that's mid-15th century and the end of the 15th, 16th century. The most perfectly preserved coin of the lot is that of Richard, bearing the impression of Richard II. So that was the end of the 14th century. Now, presumably those coins had to be sent up to the National Museum or somewhere, but they're certainly not around at the cathedral now. So information on the college is still hard to come by, and I wonder whether there are still documents in the college when it was burnt, which would have given us a fuller picture. But while the college is now long gone and largely forgotten, on entering through the doors to the nave of the cathedral, you will see an inscription which reads, "To the glory of God, the gift of friends and former pupils of St Faughnan College, 1927. And that is really the only reminder to us of its existence. So that's it. It's I got it together rather quickly, but if there's any questions or comments.
Was it all boys that were in the college?
It was all boys. Yeah, all boys. Very much.
What would be the facilities for education for girls?
That's another subject. But I mean, with the pardon me, with the setting up of the national school, that again was an attempt by the British government to provide education, co-education. Now, when girls' private schools came onto the scene, I don't know. Yes.
Yes, when did Bandon Grammar begin? Because I'm wondering, was that to change over 1905?
No, back at the same time as the college here in the 1500s. So as I said, there was this legislation, Tudor legislation, to set up these diocesan schools, and Ross wasn't set up immediately. As I say, it's 1570 seems to be time. So those three schools, Bandon, St Faughnan, and Middleton, all have a very long history.
There was a Cork Grammar School as well in the city.
Cork Grammar School, yeah.
And what did that care for? Is that just for city residents, or was it in the parish of Cork, or the Diocese of Cork?
It was in the Diocese of Cork, so because it was called a grammar school, I think it was, I don't have a date for that, but I think it was the same time, but it's the same kind of principle. Now, I mean, this one was obviously always very small. I said about 27. But as I say, I mean, I found it interesting that they accepted people of all faiths. But then I accept a question from my son.
No, is there any indication how many students there were when it shut up? Because surely that would give us the indication. Whether it's not go attendance, whatever.
Yeah. No. See, the strange thing is that in Cole in 1903 describes it as a thriving school. And the prospectus that I showed you, that was from that period. And yet in such a short time, it seems to be lost.
So that would also indicate that they weren't planning on shutting it.
Yeah. And as I say, when Dean Webster, who came in 1927, which wasn't that long after, he writes about the cathedral and so on, he makes no reference to it. That's rather strange. I've always thought it'd be rather fun to write a novel based on it and come up with some
I think there's
juicy,
some scandal.
some scandal as to why, but I wouldn't identify too much as Rosscarbery.
There was never any rule book made.
There would have been. There'd been lots of stuff. Now, as I say, I wonder whether all that was still in the building. Now, as I say, there are these endowed educational societies, and Ian Coombs of Bandon Grammar has done a lot of research on this, but he couldn't find what he had found. Is what he's passed to me. He would be an interesting speaker on the whole question of education, writing out of your question there. Yes.
What was the Reverend French, the headmaster? Was he anything to the Frenches in Westwood?
I don't know. I don't know. When we were first here in 1998, we had a very interesting visit from a family who were bringing Granny around to see the place of her upbringing. And she was a daughter of, and one of the fascinating things she told us was that when Titanic was passing, her father bundled them all into the pony trap, took them up to the headland to watch the Titanic. And she could vividly remember seeing the Titanic go by. But I asked them, did her father leave any papers or anything? And apparently when the Reverend French retired to Cork, when he died, what did the family do? Yes. It's tragic because I'm sure she said, you know, he did have lots of stuff. And that possibly would have filled in a lot of the gaps that were left with. But one of the interesting things I think is, you know, how you have something placed like this. Let's go back a bit. That was obviously a significant landmark. Oh, that's ended it. Okay. So a significant landmark. And now, you know, it's kind of, as I say, the memory is almost erased of the building being erased. And that's why, you know, I was keen to at least keep some of it.
In the earlier map that you showed us there, you know, like there was a building at right angles to it going down to the, was it for merchant home ships or marine or something, or it was at the very area, stages, and it was at right angles to the present line.
See if I can get back to it. Just to get back to the oh, I don't want to lose it.
Was it in the free map? I think.
I don't want to lose the recording. I'll go back to the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
PowerPoint. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Ah. Was it?
Was a substantial building. That's it. That's the last one there. I'd say no, not this one. No, the last one.
Yes, you mean this building there?
That's right. Yeah.
I haven't a clue what that was. The interesting thing with this map, you see all these numbers. It's got who were the occupants of all those houses. And that, as I say, number one was this fellow Matthew O'Mahony, who rented it. So it wasn't, the school wasn't there then, I believe. So what that building, what that.
I mean, when you look at the pictures of the buildings.
It's actually going down in the direction of the parking cross, what we call the parking cross now.
That one there.
Yeah.
You see, you've got, this is the shoreline.
Yeah.
Here. At one time, the shoreline was there, and you see all the landowners have been attacked. And the other interesting thing on this map here, I mentioned that the deanery was the master's house until about 1915, when they put the second bay on, and it's called the Farley Cottage. Oh. So that was before it became. George.
Why do you choose any of the prospects instead of the lineage for entrance to the school?
Well, they speak both of kind of preparatory pupils, meaning preparing for sending to English schools, and also for those being prepared for universities and for Sandhurst and so on. So in that 27 or so pupils, you probably had youngsters up to the age of 12.
I also think the picture was about 7 or 8. Actually.
Yeah. So I mean, they seem to have quite a range. They must have had very good teacher-student ratio in the school. So, do we see if the copy?
Yeah. Just you mentioned the change name there, St Faughnan.
Yeah.
And St Faughnan.
Yeah. I don't know why they did.
Oh, was that just a spelling, or was it actual change of name? Because you see the plaque in the finish.
Yeah.
They refer to it again as St Faughnan.
Yeah. No, it's two spellings of the same fellow.
I think it's just a mistake.
It's just the spelling.
Yeah, and for some reason, I said about disestablishment, and why they chose at that point. Now, at that point, it came under the, as I say, the endowed education, and it was almost, we want to keep the same fellow, but to mark the change by using, I mean, there's some, isn't there some Faughnan up the country? I think there is. I think in County Clare, there's that spelling.
Or is it just simply to do with it's phonetically easier to write it?
No, I don't think so.
Because look at it,
Yeah,
Faughnan isn't written like you hear it, it's written the Irish way.
Well,
whereas with Faughnan, I think.
Faughnan is quite,
To make sense,
yeah,
we write it that way.
I don't
Would
know.
it be a Latin variation of the name?
I don't think so.
I think it's
I don't think so. I said, as I say, I think there's two traditions of the name. It's not suddenly we've done this at Faughnan, we'll choose another fellow.
It's a bit like saying Finbar is 2 hours.
That's right, yeah, yeah. Finbar can be two words. Yes. So, anything else? Any other?
We were laughing at the silver spoon. But I can remember being in the boarding school for a while in the 50s, and the knife and fork and spoon and sheets and pillowcases were part of the things you needed going there.
And they had to be engraved as well.
Yeah.
The initials.
But they weren't silver.
No, they're
So it's just an interesting little touch that they insisted that you should have a,
Maybe it was for hygiene.
maybe it was for hygiene.
They were saying, you're born with the silver
Born with
spoon.
silver
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, born with a silver spoon.
Perhaps that's for.
Could it
Yeah.
come from, people being.
That's right, born with a silver spoon in their mouth. Yeah, yeah, maybe it's just a slight bit of pretension. Pretentiousness that, we're a bit, we're,
No business coming here unless you silver.
unless.
We'll keep you know.
Are there any lists of pupils at any time?
There's no full list. There's a page, I mean, I mentioned a few who get named. Like, as I say, there were arising in the reports of exam results, names like Jennings and Wolf and so on appear. And then one or two names given of former pupils given as referees in the prospectus. But I mean, I imagine that that's part of the whole body of information that was lost when the place was burnt. Sadly, I think that's what, because there would have been, and it'd be wonderful to have a better idea of just, I mean, I referred why I put in that thing about that Mr. Daly having struggled to pay the fees. Just that, there was a name, and the fact that he was from Bantry, and he was from a occupation that wouldn't necessarily have suggested that he was a person of means. So it was probably quite a mixed.
But I suppose when they, like the school, you said they had dispersal sale in 1905.
Yeah.
I'd say, like after dispersal sale, it wasn't stored. Like you say, the place was sold in again before it was actually burned. So I doubt if the stuff would still have been in the school at that stage. Like that could have been left vacant for 20 years.
Well, I think it's been left vacant, and then, as I say, Mrs. Beecher decided, and her husband Harry was approaching retirement, and as clergy do when they approach retirement, they think, where am I going to live? And I have to get out of the church house. And I think Mrs. Beecher thought, that would make quite a nice residence. But unfortunately for them, it was burnt.
She was no Judy.
Sorry?
She was no Judy.
So, yeah,
I just think it's interesting, and I said this when I was talking earlier, that actually a lot of the families around, if you read Judith Shabaz's book, all of those people sent their children to England to be educated. They didn't stay here. So, you know, they obviously think this was sort of maybe a lesser school than sending them to England.
I think that's right.
Shabaz's children who had to navigate a train journey right across and then the sea right across to somewhere. I don't know what it is.
From about the age of 8 or something.
From about the age, exactly from the age of about the age of 8, when
And they could have come to St
Oh,
Faughnan.
yeah.
It would be interesting to see what the role is for in Grammar and in Middleton at the same time, you know?
Yeah.
How many people there? I would imagine substantially more.
Well, I think, unfortunately, Ross Diocese, certainly for the Church of Ireland, has always been fairly small, small thing, and slightly out west. And so it was possibly never going to develop in the same way that Bandon and Cork Grammar and Middleton did. But they all have a very ancient foundation. Yes.
Amazing.
When did the Church of Ireland Diocese of Ross become integrated with Cork?
In the 1500s, I should be able to give you an exact date, but it was in the 1500s. And Bishop Lyon was the first Protestant bishop in Ross. That was 1560, latter part of the 1500s. And I think about that, George knows, 1560, thank you, George. What would we do without George? So around that time, and then, so Ross and Cork were joined, then with the Church of Ireland diocese, Cloyne was also joined. So it was the three dioceses.
So was it one bishop for all of the, call it the 3 dioceses?
Yeah, which it still is today. So it's
Because obviously in the Roman Catholic Church, Ross remained a separate diocese.
That's right.
It was annexed by Cork.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the same happened with the Church of Ireland diocese. And one of my predecessors, being Isaac Reeves, who at the end of the 19th century did the massive restoration project on the cathedral, he was trying to get Ross be recognised as an independent bishop again, which was never going diocese again. Presumably, I always say with him as bishop, but that was never going to happen.
Like Father Donovan and the Irish and the Power C, were trying to do the same thing and challenge the imagination right up to the papacy.
Right.
And it's unsuccessful.
So,
I just wonder,
sorry, go on.
I always wonder whether all the work that I've forgotten her name, who's coming to speak.
Rachel Finnegan.
Rachel Finnegan is doing a lot of research on the Reeves family, and it'd be very interesting to know whether there's more material in the Reeves family papers about the college. Because she's uncovered a lot of stuff, obviously, but about the Reeves sisters in Cork, who were actually providing a lot of money for the cathedral at the time of that restoration.
And the house was rebuilt, and was it called the White House still at that stage? Or
I don't know. But I don't know when. I mean, you've always known it as the White House. I don't know whether the Beaches I mean, he didn't live very long after his retirement. They moved into the White House, as it is now called, but it didn't have very long. Well, look, I'm sorry you didn't hear about the submarine.
I was very happy with my daughter.